Hi, I'm Tina Cummins,
I'm Belinda Powers, and we are
your crime sages. Welcome back, everybody. So, for many videos, Belinda and I have talked about how there's been no plea for Summer's return. We were wrong about that. There actually was a plea on Donna Wells' page that was posted on July 5th, 2021 that I came across, and I'd like to read that statement from Don Wells. It says, "To the kidnappers of my daughter, I've asked God, and I believe he's given me the go-ahead to plead with you first to release my daughter, and there would still be time for you to repent and change your ways and still obtain eternal life. If not, I will ask God for your destruction in a violent way. I'm asking at this time, please let her come home. We love her so much, it's indescribable. We're so deeply hurt, just so you know how it will be if you don't let her go. In 3 days, I'm asking God for your destruction. Take it from me, do not play with God." And again, that was written on July 5th, 2021. Belinda and I weren't aware of any pleas that they had made for the return of their daughter, so I wanted to correct my misinformation that I put out. So he actually did make a plea for his daughter's return. And we'll talk about that statement in a little bit. We've got a lot to discuss tonight. It's going to take us a while. A lot of new information that's come out. One of the first things I want to talk about, recently in the last week and a half, there was a video on Voices Behind the Wall where they'd recorded Don again. And so several things to cover in that. There's also some texts that have come out. There's some other stuff that's come out. So we'll start one at a time. Okay, so in this video on Voice Behind the Wall, Don said that nobody ever felt sorry for him, and he spent most of his life in prison. And he was talking about sexual abuse. And initially he claimed Jeannie was responsible for her part in it. And then he goes on to claim that all of the charges against him are BS. They're bullshit. Don said that he was a rape survivor and he was also raped in prison, and that's part of prison life. Don denied having anything to do with the disappearance of Summer. He said anybody who thinks that, they're effing crazy, they're idiots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Don said that in regard to his sister, Jeannie, he incriminated himself and his stepsisters. But then he recanted and he laid some of the blame on them. Okay, so he said that he was raised in jail and he loved him, that the food was really good. So, you know, we'll talk about that. Okay, so let's get started, Belinda. We'll take the first statement that Don made. He said, the first important that I feel is important, he said nobody ever felt sorry for him and he spent most of his life in prison. And he was talking about sexual abuse. What do you think about that?
well, we all know
There's
when you got there's been so you know there's trauma there.
Of course. I mean, for Don to say that nobody ever felt, I feel bad for the inner child that is him. It made him who he is today.
Right.
I feel bad for that inner child. You know, I'm sorry that he was abused. He's obviously got some psychological issues going on, narcissism and, you know, some other things, but that's learned behavior.
Right.
Often it's learned behavior. So I've always been, and I believe we talked about this before, I've always suspected him and Candace both of being sexually abused.
Mm-hmm.
And I've mentioned Utah. Now, ironically, Don talks about where he lived in Utah, West Valley Hills and Ogden, Utah, and both have ties to, polygamy, Warren Jeffs, the Kingston family. So, I mean, it's no secret. This is something, it's like Don Wells himself said, he grew up in that environment. So when he was a kid, he didn't know that it was wrong. And when looking at this case, you have to take that into consideration. Do I feel bad for his inner child? Absolutely.
It all plays a part.
It plays a role.
Mm-hmm.
So in looking at Don and, his narcissism, because he is very narcissistic, very, this is his world and everybody else is just a platform. It makes sense. His personality disorder, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but in just saying this, what I see is personality issues with him. It makes sense because in that environment, the men are very much in control. And if he was also being abused or seeing that abuse take place, which he in fact talked about. He talked about his sisters being molested,
right,
by others in the family, that accused others in the family. It's very interesting. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think all of this is new to him too, as far as telling himself. He's
Yes.
in that. That it plays a big role.
Yes.
He's finally probably coming out and saying, "Hey, this is what happened. When I was a child, and nobody felt sorry for him. I could see him feeling that way.
Yes. They
Being
want
traumatized,
but nobody wants to understand or try to comprehend
right,
what he went through as a child.
right,
Let's just say this, it's tragic because the cycle of abuse and sexual assault, physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, it cuts in all directions. It destroys families.
yeah. And it don't just happen to girls. It happens to
it
boys,
happens
just
to
not
boys.
as often.
But it's
Right.
a lot more difficult, I've found, for boys or men to come forward because they're supposed to be men. It's very
Right.
embarrassing,
Right.
called wimps and all the kinds of other names. Yeah. So in looking at Don's childhood, he also talked about abandonment issues with his own father. We'll get to that. So in him saying that nobody ever felt sorry for him, that's his inner child crying out. And I just want to say, Don Wells, if you were molested as a child, if you were abused or abandoned, he talked about prison food being really delicious. It makes me wonder, what did he have to eat as a child?
Right.
Prison food is good. What in the hell is he eating? What are his struggles? I want to know. And I do care. People need to realize that, and I'm not saying you have to feel sorry for anyone who continues that cycle of abuse, but it is a cycle for a reason. It repeats over and over and over until someone steps up, takes responsibility, and breaks it.
Yep.
And again, if Don was a victim of physically, sexually, emotionally, or psychological abuse, then I do have compassion for him in that aspect.
Right.
I don't want him to think that, everybody's out to get him. That's not true. And like we discussed very early on, if Don and Candace happen to be innocent of this, it's a hell of a position to be in.
Mm-hmm.
What if they didn't do it? And let's talk about Utah for a minute. Okay. I'm not talking about the whole state of Utah. Obviously, there's some wonderful people out there. But, you know, we've seen the whole Warren Jeffs thing and the Kingston family and some, you know, escaping polygamy and all this stuff, and how children are swapped and how there's a lot of sexual assault that goes on. It runs in families, how they marry off kids at a young age. I mean, it's a little frightening, but in particular, it's even, you know, it's even been found to be in the school systems out there, especially West Valley, Utah, ties to, you know, getting money or money funneled into the Kingston family somehow. And then, you know, there's a lot of stuff that went on with that. And it makes me wonder exactly what was it that happened to Don growing up.
There's no telling.
Okay.
I mean,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
you look at the family, and I'm not even going to say that, you know, they're dysfunctional, but my gosh,
Oh,
you
it's
can see
beyond
that.
dysfunction at this point.
Huh?
It's beyond dysfunction at this point.
Well, but I'm saying I don't want to throw that out there because, you know, you look at, I can't even imagine what he went through.
The whole dynamic.
The whole thing as a
Well,
whole.
kids who are, okay, so let's talk about this for a second. I haven't lit my cigarette yet. Boys in particular who grow up to be very narcissistic, demanding, self-centered, egotistical, it generally comes from anger, rage, and low self-esteem. So in looking at Don, you have to ask yourself, where's the anger coming from? Where's the rage coming from? Also, sexual assault is a learned behavior. So what did he see? Then you have to consider the lack of empathy. Now, in one breath, he takes responsibility for what he did to Jeannie. And in the next breath, he talks about how some of it's her fault.
Well, he goes back to his own trauma.
He goes that exactly how some of it's her fault. I want to talk about something really quickly, just briefly, but it's called coerced consensual guilt. Now, coerced consensual guilt is something that a lot of SA victims experience, especially when they get older, you know, or in the moment when this is happening. A lot of times what the abusers will do will say, well, you participated, you were there, you initiated it, you did this, you did that, and you're just as guilty as I am. And you know, I believe that Don knows full well what he did to his stepsisters and whomever else he victimized. I think he knows, and I think God knows he needs to come forward and take responsibility for that in order for his own atonement. And I feel like that Don is wanting someone to take responsibility for what happened to him as a child.
Mm-hmm.
His abandonment issues, his neglect issues, all of these things, because obviously talking about him as an inner child, he was victimized and traumatized. Somewhere, somehow, something happened to him. Also, the lack of empathy for others. Empathy is a learned behavior, you know, and for children that grow up in prison or grow up abused, a lot of times they don't necessarily possess empathy because that is also a learned behavior. So if he's not shown empathy or taught empathy, how is he ever going to understand it?
Right.
Interestingly enough, when I was in nursing school, we had a class, and you know, they taught us how to accurately empathize if we're working in a nursing home with seniors, for example. They had us put hard corn kernels in our shoes and wear these scratched up nasty glasses write with our left hand, and, you know, sit on rocks, and we had to do all these things so we
Get you out of your comfort zone.
get us that to, so we could look at it from a senior citizen's
Mhm.
perspective. And empathy isn't feeling sorry for someone. It's actually being able to step outside of yourself and look at something from another person's perspective. And that's what we're trying to do here with Don. Don's an injured child who grew up to be a man who wants control in his life, which is understandable, especially if he was a child that witnessed abuse, was abuse. He was obviously traumatized. And in turn, that cycle continues by him traumatizing others. That, in essence, gives him control.
Well, and we can't even imagine what they're going through
No,
with just the missing child, their baby, plus all of this on top of it.
right,
One of either or is enough to
right,
throw
right.
you over the edge. I mean, it's crazy.
A lot of times people will say, oh, well, if you were abused, you know, you shouldn't grow up to abuse somebody. Not everybody has the capacity for that.
Well, everyone's different and raised different.
Mhm,
Everybody handles things different.
mhm. And especially sexual assault, you know, that it tends to run in cycles. It runs in families over and over and over again. And you wonder why that is. For some people, it's commonplace. Unfortunately, sadly, it's commonplace. And then we talked about marginalized categories before. Even in this country, there's a lot of marginalized categories, you know, the lost boys, the ones that are kicked out of polygamy because they don't want to conform, or
Right.
they're not performing the way they're expected to. You know, there's a lot of kids that are just chucked to the wind. After they've witnessed the horrors of life, not educated, you know, not able to fend for themselves or work on their own. This is very tragic. So you wonder why, you know, things like this happen. Now this is specifically talking about Don's childhood. I find it very interesting that he said it was natural to him. That's what he grew up with. That's very telling. What do you think about that?
Well, and I always go back to try and put someone that I know in that, to try to understand it.
Yeah.
And this is one subject that is so tough because it leaves so many scars. And
Right.
people don't even realize it, unless you've been victimized,
Right.
Of course, it's almost in every family. You're going to find someone that's been victimized or molested as a child. And I look back at him, and it all makes sense. So it all falls into play.
Absolutely.
You see the things that he's doing or the things that he's done in his life, and it all fits right in.
How old was he when he witnessed it? How old was he when he was abused?
I don't think it actually ever came out, did it?
No.
When did it start?
No, he said he started in prison. He was raised in prison as a child. That he was in and out of jail when he was a teenager from like 12, 13, 14, 15 on up. Always in jail. And I mean, generally they go off the rails when something happens.
Right.
So, and that statement of his, nobody ever felt sorry for him. I feel sorry for the child that he was.
Well, yourself, Tina, like when babies when babies they grow up into it, it's normal. They don't know no different.
They don't know
And
any.
so if he didn't, anything happen to him until he got a little older, that had to be traumatizing,
Yeah.
because at some point he did know, this ain't right.
At some point, he learned that it was wrong,
Right.
and he did it anyway. What point was that? I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I can't answer that question.
Right.
But at some point, he knew that it was wrong. Now, obviously, when he was 19 years old, he was still sleeping with a 12-year-old. Hey, where I live, I've seen that happen quite a bit.
I mean, I was watching completely off topic, but Elvis Presley and Priscilla.
Yeah.
She was just a child.
Yep.
He was 25.
Loretta Lynn, 14, married.
Mm-hmm.
It's different when you grow up into it. Now, blaming
Right.
a 5-year-old at 12?
No.
No. A 5-year-old has no bearing. A 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, 8, 9, 10,
No.
11, 12, even
13, 14, maybe a little.
Maybe.
A little, maybe.
Yeah.
It's still iffy.
But the fact goes back to where he came from versus where we come from.
Mm-hmm.
Where he came from, West City, Utah, or where did I say it was? Ogden, and what was it? West Valley City. Yeah, that's a different world out there.
Yeah, a little more common.
It's more complicated than it is here.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, and then you're looking at Candace's background with her uncle, her sister that went missing, and it's interesting that they tend to attract to each other in this type of dysfunctional situation because that's what feels normal to them. Okay. So he's claiming that the charges from 40 years ago are bullshit. But he did say he was also raped in prison. So again, traumatized. So what Don is basically doing is crying out as a child, saying he was traumatized his whole life. And that's very possible. If he was raped in prison, that's not his fault. If he was raped as a child, that's not his fault. And I don't hold him responsible for that. You can only be responsible for your own actions. There are some interesting things that he did say. He said, in talking about bringing Summer home, he said only God can do that. Now, if only God can bring her home, what are the people doing out searching? Is she deceased? Does he believe?
Yeah, but he's probably just saying led by God,
Yeah.
I mean, I say that.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I'm also not a narcissist either.
In him saying that only God can bring her home, I'm asking the question, does he believe that his daughter is deceased? And it's very possible, especially if he was informed that, the first 30 hours is generally the most crucial.
Right.
So
it's actually hard
said he's trying
to say what he thinks. It's hard to say what he thinks. Well, everything that he's told has been almost like scripted.
He said he's trying to hold on to hope.
But he's saying the same thing over and over and over. Right. On all of the things. It's not like he's coming out with new information. It's all basically the same thing that he's been saying since day one.
Right. One thing I caught, a little Freudian slip. He was talking about Summer. He said he loves Summer with all his heart. She was everything to him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then in that video, Voices Behind the Wall, he said, they can't prove nothing. Was he talking about Summer or was he talking about his sisters? The question of the day. He went on to talk about his older daughter. He said she survived several rapes, including once on her 18th birthday, and there was no crying. And I was like, wow. He said his daughter didn't rat anybody out. She wasn't a crybaby. She just dealt with it.
But that's not a
I'm like,
right mindset.
holy cow, how, from
How
my
devastating.
perspective, a father would say, I'm going to kill the motherfucker.
That's exactly what my dad would have said.
My dad. And my dad was a closeted creep himself, but yeah, wow. No crying. She wasn't whining. She wasn't. Interestingly, Don says, why are they going back 40 years and now they're going to press charges? Why didn't they press charges back then? And that's what he's referring to. He's like, my daughter was raped on her 18th birthday and she didn't turn anybody in. She didn't cry. He's talking about himself again.
Yeah, it doesn't make it right.
No compassion for what his daughter went through. And again, that's the narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to him in his own childhood, self-esteem, lack of empathy, societal inappropriateness. He's a damaged child for sure in a grown man's body. I was blown away by that. How could he say that? She was raped on her 18th birthday. There was no crying, no whining.
I don't comprehend it. I can't.
He said, I'm sure it hurt her, but she didn't whine about it. She didn't cry about it. Why are they going back 40 years? Kind of like when he was asked about whomever did this to Summer, would you sentence him to prison? And he said, no, I would never sentence anybody to prison. I don't think anybody deserves that. He's telling on himself. It's kind of like in the same video, he talked about how he had inappropriate relationships with his stepsisters. But then he turned around a minute later and blamed them for it. Said, well, they participated. That's coerced consensual guilt that he's laying on them. That's a manipulation tactic of someone who is a predator. So Don is definitely a predator, and he's using the coercion. And that's probably what was used on him. He was taught that. That's a learned behavior. He talked about how he was institutionalized because he had spent his life in prison, and I have no doubt that he is. And how he talked about how he wanted to get out of it. The way to get out of that abnormal life is to learn what you missed as a child. Don definitely learned the bad way to treat people, but he hasn't been taught empathy. He hasn't been able, he's never been able to step back and put himself in another person's shoes and say, what are they going through?
Mm-hmm.
It's all about self-gratification and self-preservation with him. Everything up to this point, his denials, you know, Summer, her case and her missing persons case has been moved to the side. And all of the focus when he speaks is all on him.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for him to learn from that, he has to learn empathy. And that takes work and it takes practice. It takes him being able to step outside of himself mentally and put himself in Jeannie's shoes, put himself in Mary's shoes, put himself in his daughter's shoes, put himself in Summer's shoes and say,
yeah, I mean, mine just comes natural, but that's because that's how I was raised.
What are they going through? Yes, some people, but some people you know, we're not all raised the same, and some people
Right.
taught the brutality of the cycle of abuses. Yeah, I was an abused child, and I was a mean kid, and that is a learned behavior. You have to unlearn that behavior and learn empathy. You have to be able to step out of yourself and look at a situation and say, what am I doing wrong and what can I do to fix it? And Don's never learned that, which is why he behaves the way he behaves. And if he is truly interested in his own atonement and redemption, he also needs to learn to take responsibility for his own actions and not lay them off on other people.
That comes with it,
Exactly.
you know. Yeah, once you learn the empathy and you can actually see from their standpoint what they went through
Mm-hmm.
and understand it, then you can start, you know. Otherwise, that's definitely number one.
Well, and you and I both know that narcissism is absolute weakness.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
It's the opposite. When you're strong, I am a strong person. And I know I'm a strong person because I know that humans can be cruel.
Mm-hmm.
I have the ability to harm people. I'm a strong fighter, but I don't. A, because it's wrong, and B, because I have the ability to put myself in another person's shoes. You know, these psychopaths who are out there killing people, serial killers, whatever, or repeat sexual offenders, they objectify everybody. They don't have the ability to put themselves in another person's shoes because they've never learned it. You have to learn that behavior. And I think that Don, if he truly does want redemption from the Lord, he needs to atone for his own behavior, not lay blame on everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
and accept his responsibilities for the things that he did wrong. What do you think?
I agree. There's no other way.
There's
That's
no
a start.
There's no other way. Come out and say, look, I did this, I did that, this is what I did, you know, own it and learn from it. And then practice putting yourself in someone else's shoes for a minute. I mean, Don, if you're listening, you know, put yourself in Margie's shoes as a 5-year-old girl.
Yeah, once you own it
Shoes.
and once you take on that responsibility, you actually feel lighter. You actually release that.
Right,
and you start to heal, you know, and that's where he's got to start.
yeah. Because then and only then can you step back from a perspective of, I see why this is wrong. And that's the only way he'll learn why his behavior is wrong. Otherwise, he's just going to keep that cycle going.
Right.
Especially the things he said about his own daughter, and not just about the assaults that he himself is responsible for, but his daughter as well. And if it's true that he tried to, you know, sell his children for drugs or whatever, you know, own what you did.
Right.
And abandonment issues. Now he's got abandonment issues. Again, he said his dad married the babysitter. And he said his stepdad was a molester, which not shocking to us. Does that shock you?
No.
Was his stepdad molesting him as well, and he's afraid to come out and say it? Probably. So with
Probably
all of this cycle, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Probably where it started.
Yeah.
Starts at home usually.
And again, not only that, but the area where he grew up in is commonplace. They treat people differently out there.
Well, just talk for a second, Tina, on talk for a second on how many kids actually are being abused. I mean, the percentages. They're high.
Since the internet, it's just, you know, you went from, what did McDonough say? You went from 70,000 to, I mean, millions, 70 million since the 1970s. The internet is Satan's tool for child trafficking, human trafficking. 70,000 to 70 million. You just look
So I
at
mean, when you grasp those numbers
Satan's
and think, yeah, you grasp those numbers and it's just like, you know, look how many years this stuff has been going on. And now you just hear about it more.
Crystal's talking about, and this is so true. I mean, Dr. Phil's talked about this. A lot of people talk about this over the years, but when it comes to the internet, see, it's a predator. They're able to feed their fantasies, and this is why, you know, making love is very different than porn. Is awful. You know, Ted Bundy porn, Gary Ridgway porn. You know, all these different people, all these different predators. What starts out is them looking at porn, then goes to them searching up on the internet, then goes to them meeting prostitutes out on the street, or, you know, then there was Backpage, and there's all these escort sites, and, you know, all this stuff. Eventually, it's never enough.
Right.
When do you stop yourself? Because eventually they feed that fantasy and they keep going and going and going and going and going. That's the beauty of innocence. When you're with one person, one soulmate, you know, and you try to stay together and make it work, you have that discovery and true intimacy. But when you're looking at these sites, not only does it teach people to objectify whomever they're viewing, but it fuels their fantasies. And normal relationships become not enough. And when you're coming from a place, you know, like someone like Don, that is a very slippery slope to going from point A to serial predator and worse and beyond. But it does make sense. The internet's terrible. I think they should outlaw porn.
Yeah, me too.
I think they should, you know, anybody who's producing porn, whatever, lock them up for life. There's no cure for that. Child porn, lock them up for life.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're out there producing child porn, you should be locked up for life. Pornography is bad enough. You know, it's the same thing with the marginalized, you know, sex workers on the street that end up as murder victims, or the girls that are pimped out, the boys that are pimped out, you know, no different. Children that run away from foster homes that end up on the street, they're marginalized. They all start out as victims and end up as victims, unless they get themselves out of it, which is very difficult, especially in circumstances like Don. Because if he grew up with that, like he claims, and I believe him, I believe he was a victim.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah,
you-
he definitely fits the criteria
absolutely.
in every aspect.
Yeah.
Well, and then you also got him and Candace. You know, you have to, you don't have, a lot of times you get one of the either husband or wife has been victimized or whatever. At least the other one can kind of sympathize with and help them.
Help them.
But when you've
Yeah,
got
but if
both
you've
of
got
them,
both, odds
When
aren't good. And then that cycle just,
yeah, and neither one of them has probably spoke upon it at, you know, as a partners.
right.
I bet this is all probably new that just came out with Don, and that just in itself is just heartbreaking.
Tough on him.
to think.
Well, it's no wonder he ended up on dope.
Yeah,
No wonder he
Yeah.
ended up in and out of the system.
Yeah.
It's not a shock. And I get why he's crying, you know, feel sorry for me, poor, pitiful me. I absolutely understand it. That's the inner child crying out.
Right.
I mean, what he did to his victims is right. Oh, hell no.
But he's a victim himself.
But
Right.
he's the victim himself. And, you know, and again, the cycle continues tragically. I want to bring up something. Okay. So someone said to me in regard to the picture of Summer, that her earlobe was dark and it looks cyanotic or mottled. And I just want to show you something real quick. She's got her ear leaning up against the milk jug and the bottom of her ear looks blue. Now, if I go like this, up, top of my ear looks pink, bottom of my ear looks purple. You can't tell anything from the picture. Can you see the difference when I do that? Yeah. Looks purple, it looks mottled. Because, you know, I'm leaning up against something. Yeah, you can't really tell from the pictures. Her fingers do look a little cyanotic, though. Okay, so what am I missing here? Oops. Look at the paper. Okay. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about coerced consensual guilt. You understand what that is, but a lot of people don't understand. For example, if a child is being trafficked out of their home, the pimp or molester on the other end is telling that they'll, you know, again, Chris McDonough, lots of people's, you know, Dr. Phil, lots of people have talked about this before, but they'll maybe take a picture where the child is nude and they'll say, oh, well, if you don't do what I said, then I'm going to show this to the world. I'm going to blast it to the world. You agreed to this and now I've got you. And then the kid feels guilty, you know, but there's a lot of ways where a predator will manipulate a child. And when I was watching Mary's interview with Chris McDonough, I could see that coerced consensual guilt. You know, Don's trying to contact her. Why is she doing this now? You're going to tear apart the family. My dad's not, you know, he's not having anything to do with his dad. She claims that he was more of a father to her than her own father. And so there's a lot of dysfunction in that, you know, family dynamic. But when you get down to the root of it, you can see that coerced consensual guilt. And again, that is a learned behavior. That is something that he witnessed growing up.
Don's not understanding why they're coming out with it now. He's saying because, you know, Summer's missing, but he's not understanding that it looked really bad, especially if he did have something to do with it.
Right.
They're protecting Summer, but he wasn't saying that.
Well, and that's where you get with Don because of his, it's where he grew up, it was commonplace. You know, sexual assault was, I mean, everybody was doing it. I hate to say that, but I mean, it's pretty common.
Right.
Where Candace grew up, she saw it, perhaps experienced it. We have yet to know. But when you're looking at his perspective is different than the general public because the general public doesn't experience being assaulted. And the general public is taught empathy. And they're not taught these self-centered behaviors. You know, Mary went into a lot of Don's childhood, him acting out, him robbing, stealing, stole the family's wedding rings, you know, being on drugs, coming in with track marks, trying to sell his kids. I mean, she came out with a whole plethora of stuff. And now you've got 6 people that are accusing him. But when you're looking at Don as a child, you have to ask yourself what happened to him.
Mhm.
Why is he like that? There's a reason for that. A, it's learned behavior, and B, he was never taught empathy. Does that mean he's not guilty? No. At a certain point in his life, at a certain point in everybody's life, you have to realize that you're not above the law. And that there's some really shitty things that you can do to people. And you have to take responsibility for it. And in that way, his development is retarded. Because he takes no responsibility without blaming others.
Right.
So recently there was a so-called leaked CPS video that hasn't been verified. Have you seen that?
No.
I put it in our private chat, but you might want to take a look at that. It talks about how there was evidence of abuse at the house with the other kids and evidence of stuff going on. And Don briefly touched on someone saying that his son, his oldest son, was set up to become an abuser. And while that infuriated him, I don't think he understands, and I don't think Candace understand the long-term ramifications of behavioral patterns. But yeah, there's a video out about the so-called video, why CPS worker claimed that the Welsh children were taken. It's an interesting watch. It's not been verified. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just putting it out there for anyone who's interested. Also, supposedly there is a text from Hunter's sister, True, saying that she witnessed the kids, Candace, physically abusing the children, beating on the kids, and she claimed she witnessed Don would take naked showers with Summer. My question to her would be, how do you know? She claimed that she saw it. Well, did you saw him come out of the shower naked? Did he have a towel on? What was going on there? How do you know that that's what happened? But then again, that takes you back to the dungeon and the shed.
I mean, I wish we had the answers to a lot of these questions.
Yeah. You got the dungeon. What was going on in the shed? Why don't they want? Was it anhydrous ammonia down there? Was, something? Was there a cage down there? Was there a bed down there? What the hell was going on in that shed? It's interesting. Don said that, when he pulled up and he saw his boys down at the shed, he knew Summer was gone.
And that's what brings all of these questions.
Yeah. No, not just that. The video of the red barrel.
Well, yeah, but the shed itself.
There's
some kind of.
And the driveway coming alongside there. Yeah.
Something had to take place in this shed. At some point, something.
Yeah, I wrote down something. Interestingly enough, Don said on a video put out by Evil Exists on YouTube, Don said a while back, he said, it would have to be someone pretty desperate for money or whatever to take Summer. That's very telling.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want the person to go to jail. It has to be someone pretty desperate. They may have seen her video from TikTok. Come on, Don, just come out and say, what are you alluding to?
Yeah.
Was your daughter sold? That's not a stupid question.
No, it's in everybody's minds.
It is in everybody's minds. It's a legitimate question. Apparently, no cadaver scent that we know of was found on the
Right.
property. So a child just doesn't go poof and disappear in the middle of the day. Even under horrible, horrible circumstances, generally they're found.
And fairly quick.
And they've searched a 5-mile radius around that place like 5, 6, 7 times. Come on. What are you trying to say, Don, from those statements? Seen on TikTok, you got the red barrel there, you got the shack there. And what are you trying to tell us? Do you believe your daughter was sold and why? Was that person desperate for money? Who sold her? Yeah, he mentions the neighbors that are sex offenders of kitty porn. I'm not going to say their last name. I haven't looked it up, but yeah, he mentions them and talks about breaking into their house and so on and so forth. Don't know if he did or if that's what he's wanting to do. He didn't make that clear. Last thing I want to talk about. The creepy guy that was on the property that had the peanut butter taped up to the tree and the pink dog food. You know, if you got a pack of dogs love peanut butter, and you tape that peanut butter up to the tree, you're going to have a pack of dogs at the bottom of that tree.
Mm-hmm.
Get that peanut butter. Lay out the dog food. Dogs are under control, man.
For a while. That
Yeah,
occupies them for a while.
absolutely. They're going to be trying to get up there and get that peanut butter down. Yeah. Yeah, there's an old trick for coyotes. You know, you take a treble hook and you put it up on a string and put it up in a tree. If you want to get rid of your coyotes, put a piece of chicken on it. They got it. Horrible, horrible, horrible thing to do. Don't recommend that to anybody. But I mean, that's the same kind of thing, you know. If there are ways, if you want to keep those animals occupied, and if somebody is an avid hunter.
Well, and child predators, they think of everything. They think of everything.
And that's the thing, if Summer was sold, what in the hell would make anybody think that, you know, whomever she was sold to would bring her back? I could bring that child back. Not if they're, you know. I don't know. Again, everybody that we've discussed is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.
Well, I think the biggest thing is we're just trying to understand it.
I'm trying to understand why there's no tears, there's no pleas. The statements that, you know, Don has specifically made, you know, help us to understand where you're coming from. Come forth.
Yeah.
The more honest you can be about everything, the better the odds are that they're going to figure out what happened to Summer. And this is about her. You can't change what happened 40 years ago, but you can change what's happening right now. Yeah.
I mean, I think we said this on the very first video. Get it out there.
We did.
Come forward.
Come forward, put it all out. And I'm going to give, you know, Don, if you're listening, I'm going to give you this little tidbit. Okay. Your daughter's 5, and you say that you can't imagine anybody hurting your daughter or her being in a dungeon. Well, your stepsister was 5. It's wrong. And you have to be able to step back and put yourself in another person's shoes. You know, that's some terrible shit that happened to you, that happened to your sisters, that happened to your niece, that happened to your daughter, that happened to Rose. Somebody has to be, even if it means going to prison, somebody has to be courageous enough to say, I'm going to lay it all out there. This is what it is. And take responsibility for it.
Yeah, almost any judge.
I mean, that's the only way anybody's going to atone for their sins. What does God say? You have to confess your sins before the world. Confess them in public, and he'll forgive you.
Yeah.
Almost any judge, what?
Almost any judge will, you know, feel some compassion if you put it out there. I mean,
Take into consideration mitigating circumstances.
yeah, this is what's going on, you know, and this is what happened, and this is why we're where we're at.
You know, I had someone in my family that was facing 40 years in prison, but never did they shirk their responsibility for what they've done.
Right.
This person never had a chance as a kid. Grew up in a very bad situation with his father. And he still struggles with it. But he always stood in front of the judge and said, yes, Your Honor, I did it. And took responsibility like a man.
Right.
That's what a man does. If they do something, they own it. And that's the only way to true atonement, is you learn from it. You feel bad for it. You have guilt. Guilt is to teach you the lessons. That's why God equipped us with guilt.
Yeah, he lays it on you to make it right.
That's right. That's to teach you his lessons. And it's true, not everybody that's been abused becomes an abuser, but some do because that's what they're taught.
Right.
You don't learn empathy. You know, if you want to be normal, you got to learn to empathize with other people. You don't have to feel sorry for them. You don't have to have sympathy, but you got to be able to step outside of yourself and sit in that person's shoes and try to understand what they're going through. That's empathy.
I've jumped in a few shoes, and I'm telling you what, I got out of them faster than I got in them.
Right.
Oh, no.
Right. That's right.
It sure makes you open your eyes. Makes your problems look like they're really small compared to some of the others.
Right. And again, the truly strong people are the ones who know they're capable of hurting someone else, but refuse to.
Right.
That's when you know you're strong. When you're fully capable, but you say, I'm not a fucking crazy person. I'm not going to do that. I mean, in the military, they teach you how to improvise, overcome, adapt. They teach you how to kill. But a person in the military isn't necessarily going to go out and just start shooting everybody because they can.
Right. Yeah, you got to be able to control yourself.
Exactly. And talking about the internet, anything sexual, in my opinion, any kind of porn, doesn't matter what kind, any kind of graphic images, any of that, it is destroying the world. They need to just remove it from from the World Wide Web altogether. Get rid of it. Find it, get rid of it, destroy it. It's destroying society. It's taking people who normally wouldn't be predators and turning them into predators.
Mhm.
Got any thoughts on that?
You know, this stuff just lays so heavy on my heart. Most of the time, I'm just,
You know
it's so hard to understand. It really is.
what laid heavy on my heart today was I saw a video of Summer in a church, and Robin was holding her, and Summer reached out and she grabbed the woman, our age woman, and she grabbed her and she pulled her in when they were singing. And I thought, what a beautiful soul.
I know. I see her little face, and I'm just.
What a beautiful
She
little.
warms my heart. She really does, with the smile and the different, the different little poses and the. She really does.
Throwing
She's
up,
bright.
you
Yeah.
know, 5 years old, again, learn behavior, but she's
Yeah.
throwing up that sign.
Yeah. She just brightens my day.
Yeah.
That's why she's touched so many hearts too.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, Don was talking about Texas EquiSearch, and he was saying, oh, they're down there getting drunk in the bars and they're living it up in hotel rooms and everything. I don't think he has any idea, but these people are out there searching for your child.
Yeah, I agree with you. And he don't understand what goes into all of that.
Right.
When you're out there searching, and you're thinking that at the whole time, you're in the back of your mind, you're thinking of finding this baby.
Yeah.
Finding her out there somewhere. How in the heck can anyone judge someone that wants to, even if they did go have a beer? How could you judge them? Look what they did all day long, and they live this daily. They're volunteers.
Yeah.
They are doing this for free.
Mm-hmm.
Very few get paid for it. Very few.
And it was all about the money. We haven't taken money for our work. I've never taken a dime in 11 years. And it's been 11 years.
We pay out of our pocket.
Yeah. I can't even tell you how much money I put out of pocket working on missing cases for the last 11 years.
But I mean, and that alone, he needs to step back and he needs to say, hey, you know what? They could be working a regular job and just leaving all of these parents out there that don't know what to do or how to do it or whatever. You got professionals, and that's what they're doing. They're trying to bring her home. And he needs to step back and he needs to look at that.
I don't think he understands. You have a drone, you have sonar, you have boats, for Jodi Powers Search and Rescue. You go out there and you don't want to put the areas that you've searched out to the public, because say for example, a child predator did take his child. Okay. You don't know where he put her. You don't know where she's at. So they don't want to advertise to the public where they're searching, what they're doing. They absolutely cannot.
You're correct.
Because if they go in and they search that area and clear that area, and then the predator knows that, oh, well, they cleared that area, I can go take remains and put them in that area. So I hate to say it, but
it happens.
It happens. They can't put that information out to the public.
There's some that's been moved a few times.
Now, Belinda and we're not working with law enforcement on this case. This is just us, discussing the case. Cases that we work with law enforcement, we don't put it on the internet. We don't put it out in the public. I don't see, I don't speak, I don't hear.
Well, and you can't.
Fine goes to law enforcement. You can't, because it'll compromise an investigation. anybody, if I had a missing child, I certainly wouldn't denigrate somebody who's out there looking for
No,
her. Mm-mm,
no, I would be grateful. I
absolutely.
was grateful. I
Right.
was grateful for each and every one of them. And still to this day, it still just, it warms my heart just to think how much they sacrificed just to help me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He said he knows the police were looking, but he has no respect for, Midwest Equal Search and Dave Rader. I have a lot of respect for him because,
Oh, I do too.
and the money thing, listen, search and rescue, especially a group like Texas Equal Search, Jodi Powers, Midwest Equal Search, Tennessee, search and rescue, a lot of these groups, they're privately funded, and it costs a lot of money to get equipment. It costs a lot of money to gather people together, to get computers, to get sonar, to get drones, to get
Well,
cameras.
there's so much. There is literally so much that goes into these searches.
Yeah,
It doesn't stop when they come in from out there, and they, it doesn't stop.
no,
They are constantly looking up stuff. They are constantly checking footage. They are constantly checking maps. They are constantly, it is a ongoing from the time that they wake up to the time they go to sleep. When they're on these cases, they are usually 17, 18 hours a day.
yeah. Adventures,
Just
Adventures with Purpose is another one. How many people have they recovered? Divers. You don't always have your local search and dive rescue recovery
Right.
operations, especially if you're down in the middle of nowhere.
Right. Yeah, you're normally going to get these organizations, these nonprofit organizations are the one that's going to help.
Yeah.
They're the ones that goes out there and volunteers. Usually it's because either they know someone or family members or something was missing.
And listen, how many searches have we been on? Okay, so at the end of it, you go to a bar and you have a few beers. What goes through your mind when you see somebody that's been brutalized? You see an autopsy, you see photos, you see all these things.
It is the most.
It sticks with you forever.
Well, now you're going to get on a touchy subject here, and I'm going to say it. When you're out there and you're searching for these missing persons, and I'm not going to use any case in particular,
No.
but there has been some that has been, out there for 2 or 3 months or 6 months, some a year, depending. You don't want the family to have to find them.
No.
You don't want that last image constantly, flashing back, or nightmares, or all of the stuff that goes with this. And yourself, Tina.
Yep.
And I hate to even say it, but some of these killers love the shock.
Yeah.
They love when people find them. They love to, just traumatize and
those are victims.
Yeah. Not all are. Some are just, thrown out. And
yeah.
So I look at all of that stuff, and it's heartbreaking. And to just say that, Texas Equal Search is this or that. I mean, my gosh.
But he's saying specifically Dave Rader and Midwest Equal Search. And I think the reason Don is saying that is because, he hates Chris McDonough for what he did. He feels like Chris backdoored him. But also, Chris McDonough's coming from a place of law enforcement where he did victimology for many years.
Right.
In saying that, that Don was a victim, that doesn't excuse him victimizing someone else. For example, okay, when my daughter was young, I was robbed by a particular psychopath, local. Not going to say who, but anyway, I was robbed, had my car stolen, had my money stolen, and all these things happened. Now, this happened to me. I was robbed as a kid growing up. I've been robbed many times. I've had my car out front and my husband's car hit by heroin addicts twice. I don't go out and do that to other people because I've learned empathy.
Right.
I've learned that it's wrong. You know, God gives us the command. There's more than 10. Believe me, there's like 200, more than that even. But if you go through and you read your Bible, it tells you specifically, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and this is why. You have to learn that. It's a process. And some people that are narcissistic, they don't ever think of someone else. They think of what they want, what their goal is, and they'll objectify people. And these predators, that's precisely what they do. They don't think of anything but their own selfishness, their own sick fantasies, their own world. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you didn't. You didn't. I was just saying, you know, he needs to step back and he needs to
Reevaluate
yeah,
his way of
definitely.
thinking.
Hmm.
He needs to reevaluate his own way of thinking.
Yeah.
And
Because there's so
grow
much
up.
that goes into it.
He needs to grow the fuck up.
Yeah.
He definitely has that prison mentality. Prison speak, constantly.
Hard ass.
Yeah. That doesn't mean I don't feel sorry for his inner child. I absolutely do. And I believe that, you know, he was molded into this character. That
Right.
doesn't mean he's not redeemable. You know, that's up for God to decide. But he's also responsible for the crap he did in his life. I'm responsible for the crap I did in my
I
life.
was just going to say,
Career.
as I am and you are, and you're right.
Everybody is.
And we know we're far from perfect and we don't try to be. I have plenty of flaws.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is too, and getting back to, you know, search and rescue and him coming down on these people. What if they did find her? What if they do? You know, TBI and a few other people, they made it very clear that they are not there as a law enforcement capacity. They're there, and search and rescue is always in cooperation with law enforcement. Something I wanted to bring up, Duty Ron talked about psychics. Now, where do we begin on this one? I think I need to light a cigarette for this one. He said that there are some valuable psychics out there, and that's true. The problem with law enforcement working with psychics is it's very difficult for them to discern who is full of shit that's trying to exploit a case for money and who is a true and accurate psychic. And there's a lot of law enforcement because of religious purposes individually, they won't even work with psychics. Absolutely refuse others. Cases are well. Duty Ron is right in saying that the detectives are the one who's responsible for arresting, bringing charges, investigating, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He is 1,000%, 1,000,000% correct in that. You know, now I've known a lot of psychics, as you have, and, you know, we found missing persons. We've worked with law enforcement and been able to put them in the right direction. But the bottom line is it goes down to the detectives. That weight is on their shoulders. And it's always up for law enforcement to find out what the hell happened.
Right.
Why it happened, how it happened. He is absolutely correct in stating that. The profilers, John Kelly, Chris McDonough, you know, all the way back to Dale Hinman, you know, many others. it is up to them, if jurisdiction will allow, for them to pursue justice. In saying that, just know this. Everybody's got to claim responsibility, and if you don't, there's a hell waiting on the other side. I've seen it. I know it exists, so good luck with that. You know, you can only be responsible for yourself and take responsibility in front of the Lord, because if you don't, you're going to pay. And that takes me back to Don's statement when he was saying that, you know, he's going to pray for whoever kidnapped his daughter to suffer.
Yeah.
That's, again, another very narcissistic statement. I don't want anybody to suffer. I would prefer that everybody repent. Let's all just say, God, I'm sorry. Fix me, please. You know, please wipe away this crazy burden from my brain for the crap that I've done, and forgive me. Forgive my sorry ass. I mean,
Yeah.
frankly, you know there's a hell.
He's not thinking straight though. He is not. Regardless if he's been, you know, victimized and all of that. That's just a more of a part that plays in it, but he's not thinking straight. Regardless, and I'm gonna say it,
Right.
regardless, guilty or innocent. If he's totally 100% innocent, it's pure hell.
Absolutely.
With her missing. If he's guilty of doing something, that still lays a heavy on his heart.
Absolutely.
So regardless, right now, I would not want to even change shoes with him for 2 minutes.
Nope. Nope.
Because I would be crying and, you know, hugging the floor probably.
Well, and just think, if he is responsible and he doesn't have any specific feelings about it, then he already knows he's a sociopath.
Yeah.
He is devoid of emotional feelings, which
Right.
he doesn't seem to be to me. He doesn't seem to fit that mold of a pure sociopath. So, you know, he seems very narcissistic and lacking empathy, and a victim himself. He seems like a grown child who's fumbling through life and doesn't know how to find his way. And the only way to get through that is by therapy and atonement, and, you know, acknowledging your sins and moving forward. You can't go back and fix what's done. You can only move forward. You know, I don't know if Don is guilty or not. I'm going to say that again. A lot of the stuff that he says is pretty damn shocking.
Yeah, I don't either. I can't.
But I'm not in this to attack the Wells family. I'm just trying to figure out what happened to their kid. As a lot of people are out in the world. You know, he's saying that the whole world is against him. No, the whole world isn't against you, Don.
No.
But there's
I'm not for a second.
No, I'm not. There's a
And
way.
you're not either.
There's a way to handle all of this.
Yeah.
And we talked about this from the very beginning. You know, if there's a history of sexual abuse, you know, get it out on the table. If you're not guilty, get it all out there. People are going to speculate one way or another. He said that it's either 98.7% or something like that would rather believe a lie. Now, I don't believe that estimate is accurate. I want to know the freaking truth.
Right.
I want to know what happened to this child, and I pray to God for her safety. Regardless of the outcome. And you know, by looking at the family, I mean, the dysfunction is obvious. The house is this disarray, hoarding, you know, that all speaks to emotional trauma in their past. Angie brought up, you know, the red barrel again, and, you know, most parents would look at that video on TikTok and say, oh my God, there's a for sale sign. I need to turn that around, or I need to get that out of the video. I would never post that on TikTok. You know, that's talking in Candace's mind, you know. That's not normal parenting. That's a red flag. You would say, oh, hell no, I'm not going to post that. But with the alcoholism and the drug abuse and all the other stuff that's going on and the dynamic,
might have had something to do with it and might have had nothing to do with it. I mean,
right?
Could have been totally, you know, used for a yard sale. Or
if somebody said that Heather Smith had commented on a few other videos, if you're the viewers out there and you see where Mr. Heather Smith is commenting on other videos, please let me know. I appreciate that. Put it down in the chat below.
yeah, I'd like to see that myself.
Yeah, I want to know what's going on. And again, we're not taking anything away from Don's victims, his sisters, his family. You know, we're just trying to comprehend where he's coming from as an injured child.
Yeah, and pointing fingers just get you nowhere. So we're trying to understand it.
Right. You ever watch the movie Good Will Hunting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you know about attachment disorder. That's a really good movie about attachment disorder, where people that have been traumatized over and over and over again, they'll do everything to push somebody away.
Oh, that was Matt Dillon, or no? Matt Damon.
Matt Damon, and Ben Affleck, and
yep,
the comedian.
That's the brothers.
Robin Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good movie, and it's, you know, pretty clear on attachment disorder. It doesn't go into sexual assault or anything like that, just physical abuse, but, you know, it's the ability to able to trust someone. And I mean, you know, in speaking in those terms, is any good investigator worth their salt is going to, they're going to list out their persons of interest, and they're going to try to rule them out. I'm still not ruling anybody out either.
Right.
Sheriff Lovesley, he's not ruled anybody out. I'm not ruling anybody out. I'm not accusing anybody of being guilty. There's a lot of suspicion around this child. Sharks swimming all around her, but I'm not narrowed in on anybody yet. Well, yeah, sort of.
Sort of, kind of. Not the family, though.
Kind of, sort of. Yeah. And again, that takes it back. What if the family didn't do this?
Yeah,
that puts them in a hell of a position with that background, doesn't it?
It does.
Wow.
It does. But it's sad.
Absolutely. It's sad for this child, you know. And Don is absolutely right when he says his daughter may be gone to the other side, because generally if something like that happened, it's within the first 3 hours.
Right.
So, man, oh man. You know, if you want to be safe, if you want to know, listen, it's like a psychopath. If they decide they're going to go out and kill somebody, it's very much a person on the other side can do about it. But people need to start buying those Ring videos or Ring cameras and putting them up on their property. And, you know, this world isn't safe anymore. So,
Yeah, at least so you can get some kind of,
some kind of lead, you know?
yeah.
Still looking for
direction.
that 1998 to 2000 red Toyota Tacoma. TBI is not talking about it, but they're still looking for anyone who's seen that truck in the area. There's a reason. So far, Don and Candace haven't been charged. They have not been charged. And the police are still looking for the red truck.
And that actually speaks loud.
That's
into me.
oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking 3 months coming up.
Oh,
Yeah, that's speaks
Tomorrow?
loud.
tomorrow it'll be 3 months. That speaks volumes. They haven't charged Don and Candace with obstruction. They haven't charged them with anything yet. Now people will say, oh, well, it took them a long time to charge Chris Watts, you know, Barry Morphew, you know. My point is the investigation is still up in the air.
Yeah, law enforcement knows way more than we know.
Absolutely. And again, Duty Ron is correct. It is up to them to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of things that don't make sense about Summer's case. And that's the difficult part about this. You know, the detectives and investigators working on this case, my heart goes out to you. But I know they have to follow up on every lead.
But every case at the end, it kind of all makes sense.
Yeah.
Once you get all the information, it kind of makes sense on what happened that day.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll come out. Whatever happened, you know, it'll eventually come out. It always does. Even if it doesn't in this life, it will in the next. I'm confident of that. All right, dear. Well, I think we're about good for tonight. Is there anything you want to add?
It's nice talking to you.
It's nice talking to you, hon. You know I love you.
Brings back a lot of emotions, but
yeah,
it's always good.
Well, and I don't think investigators realize when you do have, God, I hate that word, psychic. When you are clairvoyant and you can see it in your head like a movie, you know, living with that every night is very difficult.
Yeah, it's a nightmare on its own.
But I got to tell you, I'm not working Summer case like that. I did briefly for a minute, but I'm not going there. Won't, because I'm already front loaded.
Right.
Front loaded means the front part of your brain has already seen too much and, you know, you can't analyze it properly. Because there's too much out there already. When I work cases, I want to work them raw. I don't want to know anything up front. Don't tell me anything. Don't want to know anything. We need to start, you know, posting some stuff on some other cases. All right, dear. Well, to our viewers out there, God bless you. Stay safe, be vigilant, watch your kids, watch their social media. Very dangerous thing, social media. All right, take care, folks. Good night.
Good night.